I'm just curious about both of your answer to this. In the way the law is now, and the way things are currently, if a child sought help independently, if a child from one of these communities that we're talking about found themselves or was brought by someone else into the hospital and sought for medical attention, is it plausible that the medical officials would need to deny help because of these laws as they stand?
I think it's very possible that could happen, because the way the law is written, it says that a judge has to take under consideration any treatment that that parent is providing by spiritual means. So if you say, just like if you've got a child that's in an emergency room that's incapacitated, the parents are coming in and they're allowed to take those children out of that emergency room. So that's really not in the best interest of that child. So I could very much see in some communities where these churches are integrated. It's just like Oregon was different because the churches in Oregon started in about 1940. The churches in Idaho have been ingrained into Idaho since the early 1900s. The first church was established in Blaine County in 1900. Okay, so Caldwell, Canyon County area, Waihee County, you've got a lot of farm country. A lot of these people are living on property that was homesteaded by their parents. So you've got a large community of people that think alike. They're not going to act against these parents.
Now, I'll give the classic law professor answer, which is it depends. And it does. I think if it's a 17-year-old child, probably very difficult result than if it's a younger child, sort of under the age of 7, let's say. So I think that makes a huge difference, and we see that already when it comes to doctors. There is some point at which a child just gets to be a certain age where they have all of those privileges when it comes to doctor-patient confidentiality and that sort of thing. It also depends on which of the statutes. This language is in, I think, about 4 different Idaho statutes. One really just deals with whether you can bring a prosecution for child neglect, right? And I don't think that there's anything in that statute that would stop a hospital from giving medical care to that child. I also think it depends on what sort of state is that child in medically, right? If you're dealing with a super emergency sort of decisions have to be made, you may not even have time to find parents to get permission to do stuff. And there is some point in the fluidity of responding to medical emergencies where the court has given hospitals and doctors far, far more autonomy than if you have sort of parents sitting in the waiting room who are there from the beginning. So I think it would depend on a myriad of factors.
Yeah, I think the definition of this really would be more in the civil law because of the definition of a neglected child.
Right.
And in the one statute, it said that the parent or child has to be a member of a bona fide religion that practices faith healing alone, spiritual means alone. So basically what they're saying is you have to be a member of a certain protected church that believes in faith healing alone before you could actually use these statutes. So that's a little bit of a conflict there too.
Yeah, and I think what could be an interesting sort of the inverse of your question, which is, what if a hospital does provide medical care, does not get sort of the permission of the parents, and the parents are of the type who don't want medical care for their children? Could those parents then bring some type of cause of action against that hospital for giving medical care to their child against their wishes? I think that could be a very much more likely, well, maybe not much more likely, but that could also be a scenario here too, where it's the parents who are saying, hey, I didn't want my child to get that medical care. You gave my child that medical care. You've violated my rights, and now I'm going to bring a lawsuit. And again, I think some of the same factors would apply there. How old is the child, what type of emergency, and that sort of thing.
So I guess from your legal opinion then, would it be perhaps easier to try to change this from the standpoint of a court case rather than going through the politics of the state legislature?
Well, you know, I'm a baby Idahoan. I've only been here about 5 years, but I do, maybe almost 6 years, I do know enough to know that it's probably always easier to go around the legislature than it is to try to get things done, especially on very controversial issues. You know, I have thought about sort of what would a court case look like, because I think part of the difficulty is no court's ever interpreted the statute to determine what the bounds are. I actually do believe that if amending the statute is not an option, then the next best option is for there to be a court case and get the Idaho Supreme Court to actually tell us what are the parameters of parental rights, what are the parameters of that child's individual rights, and sort of what is the proper balance between those two propositions. I actually think also that in some way the court could give more sort of authority on that and maybe sort of get it out of this difficult political atmosphere. And in that sense, maybe people would have more respect for the court's decision as opposed to the legislature sort of coming up with some type of compromise that nobody may actually end up liking.
Addressing that issue too, I actually contacted the ACLU probably a little over a year ago because I was told we would have a better chance of repealing these laws in the court than we would in the legislature. Okay, another person was actually talking to one of the heads of the Idaho ACLU in Boise. He contacted the national office. They said that they would fall on the rights of the child rather than the parent if it was a case that they would take. We were proceeding with trying to get a case started. Unfortunately, the ACLU changed heads in Boise. The man that's in charge of it now denied ever getting my email requesting for them to investigate it, and he said they did not have the funds or the time to be involved in this.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems here is because there seems to be very little investigation. It's very difficult to imagine unless you just sort of had a horrible set of facts, right? Or clear evidence of some type of physical abuse unrelated to some type of medical condition, and then a parent who's sort of using this as a pretext to sort of get around the criminal implications. My question is, how will we even know that ever happens if nobody's going in to perform the autopsy and to sort of confirm that, yes, this is just a clear case of the statute being at play versus something else. And to me, that's what's troublesome, is that, like I said, these kids seem to be falling into this black hole where we as a society don't have no idea what's going on in some of these communities. And really, there seems to be no way to really probe to determine what's actually happening.
Yeah, I think I've probably got more documentation on the deaths than anybody else in Idaho does. And I think it's more because I know the names and I know how to get the public records.
Hi, thank you, Linda, and beautiful name, Shakira. It's really beautiful, and when you said it, I was like, gosh, I just screw it up, you know? Anyway, yeah, you guys have really done a great job presenting some of the issues, and this is certainly a very important discussion on, you know, how far are we going to go, because I actually don't have a lot of faith in the medical profession. So that's a lot of people's concern about this, is how far it's going to go to force us into a medical system that is totally broken.
Mhm.
I mean, we have, I don't know if you realize the number of medical errors. I mean, this has been widely reported. Johns Hopkins University, that was earlier this year. I mean, 250,000 annually as of 2013. You know, and that was up from, what was it, 98,000
Yeah.
in 2000, then went up to 180,000. I mean, it was 98,000 annually just in medical errors, deaths caused by medical errors.
Thirdly,
So this is a
positive.
concern that, you know, while you're saying they need medical care, well, do they have a license to kill? And then the parents, if God forbid, one of their kids dies under their care. See, so it's a fine line, you know, especially when the numbers of deaths from medical errors and from the medical profession itself is so out of control at this moment. And we have, like, Ty Bollinger put out The Truth About Cancer. You can go to thetruthaboutcancer.com, it's getting very popular. And there's all these survivors of cancer, survivors of chemotherapy and radiation, people that are refusing chemotherapy and radiation. So some of us are concerned, well, what if my kid gets diagnosed with cancer? I don't want to go to, you know, have them treated with chemotherapy. And, you know, I mean, this is a huge concern. I'm just saying how the law is worded for people that seek alternative care. So that's my biggest concern, and I wanted you to address the huge rise in numbers of people that are shucking the frickin' medical profession. Thank you.
I think I can address that pretty well. I personally use alternative medicine for myself because I grew up in a faith healing family. I did not take any form of chemical medication until I had my son when I was 18, 19 years old. I have severe allergic reactions to it. I also have a medical doctor that prescribes alternative treatments and chemical medication if I need it. These laws only pertain to people who use prayer alone. There are separate statutes that deal with alternative medicine. You've got controls over practitioners. There's other statutes that deal with chemotherapy. These are children that are not seen by any form of medical or mandated reporter to report them when they're sick. They're getting no treatment. I was not allowed even to take a vitamin. We couldn't use any herbal supplement. We weren't even allowed to drink herbal tea that had a medicinal use on it. We're talking about people that do absolutely nothing. Alternative care, chemotherapy, all of that is addressed in different statutes.
Well, and I'll say just from a personal anecdote, I grew up in a Muslim household. My mother was a very devout Muslim for most of her life. And, you know, I got to college and I never had a vaccination before, much to my chagrin. I was told that I actually could not enroll unless I took myself down to that medical office and got those shots. And so I think we're all subjected to the beliefs of our parents. And for me, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. And I often think when I'm thinking about this issue of the situation where you have the parents, the child's in the hospital, the doctor says, we want to perform this, right? And the parents say, no treatment, whether it means my child dies, right? There doesn't seem to be anything inherently wrong with that either, right? I think we can all agree that in most cases, we'd say, especially with younger children, hey, it's up to the parents whether they want their child to have that treatment. I think part of the difficulty here, at least for me, is this idea that at least in that situation, we're sort of in this framework. Hospital, records are being collected, right? Tests are being done. We're monitoring. We're leaving our trail of the events. Whereas in our situation here, we have no trail of the events. We don't even know if death certificates are accurate. And there's a clear public health desire to keep track of what is causing people to die, right? And so to me, that's part of where the problem lies, is we're so outside of the frameworks of our normal processes that it seems to me that there is a lot of ability for things to go wrong. And once they go wrong, there's really no ability to sort of go back and review. So in that hospital situation, if there is medical negligence, guess what? There's going to be a lawsuit or the threat of a lawsuit. There'll be some accountability, right? Some back and forth. And from a legal standpoint, those mutual sort of that back and forth is what creates our legal framework for us to be able to sort of make our records and all of that, whereas we have this other process. Well, we don't seem to have all of the benefits of keeping our records, documenting things, discovering what's happening, and as a society, keeping ourselves informed with the world that we're in. So to me, again, I'm not 100% against people having the ability to make these type of decisions for their children. I just think from a legal standpoint, there could be a lot wrong with doing it outside of some type of framework where we can sort of go back as citizens, right? And sort of review these types of things for our own personal educational benefit.
There's a case right now in Idaho. The girl was arrested, I believe, last night in Gooding. She's 23 years old, and her daughter was having some severe medical issues. She was actually arrested, and her child was taken away from her because she gave her daughter cannabis butter. The daughter was on some severe antipsychotic medication, and when the father had the daughter for visitation, he took her off of that medication cold turkey. The side effects are psychotic breakdowns. Okay, so you've got a woman that had a young child. That child's been taken away from her, and because she used an illegal substance, okay? If that was a faith-healing family, that child would not have had a blood test to find out that it had been giving anything. There's absolutely no accountability to these parents at all if they neglect their children. If they're not getting autopsies, you don't know if they've got a communicable disease or not. It's just like when I was in junior high school, I went to high school with whooping cough. How many children did I infect when I was there? The teachers, everybody just totally ignored me. I had no rights. I couldn't go to the teacher and say, hey, I'm sick. The only thing they did is they let me sit out because I was coughing so hard I couldn't breathe and I was vomiting. They didn't want to clean up the mess. But yet nobody turned us in at all. Anytime I was sick or injured, not one person in that school ever turned us in for anything. You know, and that brings up another case too, in 1944, Prince versus Massachusetts in the Supreme Court. It stated that parents are not allowed to martyr their children, but under the same identical circumstances. The parents can be martyrs, but they cannot, under the same circumstances, make martyrs of their children. And under that ruling also, they said that the parents cannot expose the child or community at large to a communicable disease or injuries.